Today's guest is a serial entrepreneur, business growth specialist who studied animal psychology and neuroscience in college, then studied law at UC Davis School of Law, then became an attorney in the state of California before founding numbers of multi-million-dollar businesses, who now owns his own digital marketing service. His name is Clayton. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so I actually didn't notice that you studied animal psychology. Like, wow, like that sounds super interesting. What was
You know, it is. And it's really funny because even though I don't practice it as a way of living, I still very much enjoy it. And I'm currently binge watching Our Planet on Netflix right now. So I still love me some David Attenborough and some nature shows.
Wow. No, I genuinely, I don't think I know anyone who studied animal psychology, like other than you.
It's actually
like amazing.
Yeah, it's physiology. It's how the bodies work, not necessarily how the animal minds work.
Oh, I see. Now I see. Okay, so today I wanted to talk about you today, okay?
Okay.
I know that you're a serial entrepreneur, right? Like you started multiple businesses, and you were also a lawyer or attorney before. Can you give me some background of your story? Did I get all the story right, or did I miss anything? Like, can you?
No. I think you've got the big overview.
Okay.
Yeah.
Give us more juice. Like, what's your background? What's your story? Can you tell us, like, overall?
Yeah, I mean, just it's everything that you mentioned. Kind of an eclectic background of studying the biosciences, to studying law, to kind of being an entrepreneur and starting several businesses, some of which were very successful, and some of them which, quite frankly, failed. And so it's been an up and down learning process. And I think I learned early on too that for me, I'm happiest when I am creating. That there's something in the creation process that gets me out of bed and gets me excited about the day, even if the days are longer or harder than if I'm just punching a clock and showing up, from a typical 9 to 5. So. That's what sort of led me into the entrepreneurial world, and that's what kept me here as well, because I love the, like I said, I love building, and when we're talking about building, we're also talking about making a serious impact on other people's lives, because that's what we do as businesses. That's why we hold up our shingle and put out our services or our products. It's really to make other people's lives better.
So that actually made me another question. So you said that, like, pretty much when you wake up, like, you have some purpose to live up to, right? Like that's what excites you every morning. But as business owners, as we are, I have already also experienced something like this, where I just couldn't, like, keep up with my energy. Like, I just felt like, oh, this is gonna be so hard. Like, another day of, like, this is like a early phase of startups. Like, pretty much anytime you're starting your new thing, like, nobody's giving you the confirmation that you're gonna succeed, or nobody's giving you the permission that you can feel you would be successful. Like, you know what I mean? And then even then, like, you have this such a strong mental gravity and self-doubts, you still have to get up and do it, like, in order for you to create something you want to build, right? So how would you manage that, like, when nobody's believing in you, right? Like, how would you go about that?
Boy, you've unpacked a lot of questions there, so let me see if I can get to all of them.
Okay.
The first thing I want to address is I want to debunk a myth that's out there, where a lot of guys like to say, oh, just take the first step. The first step's the hardest, right? We have famous quotes that says the journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step, and that's very true. But I'll also say that, the first step sometimes is the easiest one because you can work yourself up into a lather of enthusiasm and excitement. And, you can take that first step.
Mm-hmm.
And whether it's starting a new business venture or whether it's starting a new workout routine, you can get up for that first step and you can game plan the whole thing. And in the words of the great Mike Tyson, we can all have a great game plan and it goes out the window when you get punched in the face. And so I always say, so I also have a background in sports and did competitive para-triathlon for about 10 years. And the first step's always easy, but it's, can you show up on that second day when the body's a little bit sore? Can you show up on that third day when you don't really have the same amount of energy? How about on the fourth day when your mindset just isn't into it? And so you have to play these little games to trick yourself. But those are the days that are the more important days to just show up and do something.
Right.
I used to trick myself, like if I was sick or I didn't feel well, I made a deal with myself and I said, all right, Creighton, you go to the gym and pound weights, or you go to the pool and you swim for 5 minutes. Because if you could schlep your way, pack everything up, get over to the gym, get into the pool and work out for 5 minutes, if you still feel lousy, you can go home. No problem. I never once did that where I didn't finish the workout because I always felt better after the workout. So to bring it back into the entrepreneurial and the business world, it's really the same thing. We ride this sinusoidal wave of up and down and up and down. And when you're down, sometimes you need to give yourself a physical break. Sometimes you need to give yourself a mental break. Sometimes you need to give yourself a spiritual break and, really disconnect for a small period of time. And on those days, I follow the words of Tim Ferriss, where he says, hey, look, if you look down your laundry list of to-dos and you simply don't have the time or the energy to get everything done, what's the one singular thing that you can do today that will move your business forward the most? And so if you can get that done, even if it only takes an hour or 2 hours, and by the way, it's usually the hardest thing and the one thing you don't want to do on that list. But if you can do that, then you've had a good day. And then you can take a little time off to yourself, go get a massage, go meditate, or whatever it is you need to do to get yourself back into an energetic state of mind. Because managing your energy is a big deal when it comes to being an entrepreneur, when it comes to being a business owner.
So I want to dig a little bit more deeper into that. So entrepreneurs tend to be workaholic, right? Like you said. And I personally met a lot of entrepreneurs, and including myself, I tend to be like just working without nonstop, right? And then it's just like by the nature. And I think a lot of people have hard time understanding the importance of taking a break. You know what I mean? And then I still kind of have problem with that. Like I'm the kind of person who's either or kind of person. So I'm at the very extreme side of everything. So if I'm in, I'm like all the way in. Like that's the kind of personality I have. But then because I have this personality, I tend to, in the past, I've experienced a lot of burnout. So I think you brought out a very good point right there. You said, taking a break is something that tactically you can use to keep the momentum or keep the motivation going, right? Like how do you, for all the workaholic people who are listening, how do you advise managing that energy, integrating the habits of taking rest and taking rest?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's an individual tactic for each person. I think it's very important to, from a physical standpoint, you got to move. There's just no two ways about it. You got to move.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're into lifting weights and pounding weights at the gym, go to the gym, 3, 4, 5 times a week and pound weights. If your jam is in the pool, if your jam is just walking at the local park, I mean, there's so much, if you're just sitting there at your computer pounding away. And by the way, entrepreneurs are the dumbest people in the world. We are. We'll trade in a 40-hour-a-week job where we have no responsibilities when we go home, so that we can work 80 to 100 and be tapped into our business 24/7 and never give ourselves a break and make less money. So we're dumb animals. But having said that, it's really important to figure out what your jam is when it comes to moving around. I had a friend of mine or a colleague who said, I hate going to the gym. I said, cool, don't go to the gym. Go do what it is you've got to do. I strongly stress figuring out what hobbies that you want, so that you can mentally disconnect. I mean, the reason why I love the pool so much is because I actually can't bring my phone into the swimming pool. And by not being able to bring my phone into the swimming pool, the moment I jump into the water to the moment I get out, I am completely cut off from the rest of the world. Even if that's only for a half an hour or an hour of time, I'm disconnected. And in that moment of being disconnected, I can recharge my batteries and recharge my energy so that I can come back stronger. And, and from a spiritual standpoint, it's whatever, again, I think it's very individualistic. If you're Christian or Catholic and you believe in God, go to church. If you're into, some of the Eastern philosophies and meditation, then go meditate. But whatever it is you have to do, quieting yourself is really, really important as well. Because if you're constantly inputting, you never get that opportunity to digest it all, and then that just continues to build your stress levels up.
So can you tell me a little bit more about the maybe hard experiences that you had building up your businesses, your past businesses? What were the hardships that you had to overcome?
Yeah, I think there's a lot, and I'll warn entrepreneurs or those who are on the fence trying to get into it. I mean, it's not a matter of if you'll fail, you will. It's when. And not to say that you'll fail massively, but there are going to be bumps in the road. It just doesn't work smoothly, and so you got to be prepared for it. There was a great TED Talk that said that successful entrepreneurs, it didn't matter what their education was. It didn't matter what their socioeconomic class was. It didn't matter what their ethnicity was. The one common denominator that they all had was grit or perseverance. And so you've got to be able to, persevere through the good times and the hard times. And by the way, the hard times are actually really, really important, because those give you a huge opportunity to learn about yourself and to learn about your business and what you're all about, because there's nobody in the world, even the most seasoned business veteran, that can imagine all the different possibilities that will happen. And so things will come up, and you got to roll with the punches, as they say, and you got to learn from them.
Was there any
about earlier, manage your energy.
So what were you thinking about, though? Like, is that what you were thinking about when you were going through like anything particularly, like when you were going through a hard time, something particular?
Yeah, I think that every time that something hard's coming along, I mean, obviously the first thing that comes to mind is how do I get out of this, right? Like, but there's nowhere to go because you are the business, and you know, the buck stops with you. So it's like, okay, how do I ask better questions so that I can get better answers? So if you want to keep going down the black hole, the rabbit hole, and deeper into that, you know, bottom valley, you ask bad questions. You say, oh gosh, why me? Or why is this happening? Or why does this keep, happening to me? And that's how you get stuck really quickly. And so what I try and do is I try and ask, better questions and be, so let's say we have, a client that's unhappy. It's like, okay, well, what would it take to turn this thing around and make this client, happy? And what would it take to improve this situation? What would it take to have ourselves become, better so that this situation never happens again? And so then we can take a potentially upsetting situation and turn it into a very big positive and grow from that. That's really has to be the mindset of every entrepreneur. I talk to, for example, restaurants, owners. They get all upset because a customer will come in and then write a terrible review on Yelp, and and you got to be careful because some guys are trolls and they're just going to do what they do. But I tell them, I say, look, when somebody writes a bad review on your restaurant, it's a grand opportunity. Like, it feels bad. Your initial reaction is to feel bad, but it's a grand opportunity because 94% of the people who have a bad experience at your restaurant won't tell you. They just won't return. So that small 6% that had a bad experience and felt compelled to write about it, the reason they write about it is because they expect it better and they want better from you. And so this is now your opportunity to reach out and say, hey, we hear you, we listen to you, and we're committed to making your experience better. And so you can actually flip that bad situation into a good situation. You invite them back and you say, hey, look, we've had, whatever the issue is, we fixed it. We'd love to have you come back. And then they come back, and now they've turned somebody who perceived it as a negative, and now it's a gigantic positive because now they're a fan of yours because they're like, wow, these guys really, really cared. And so that's the belief and the mentality that you have to have, is that even the negative or seemingly negative experiences are really opportunities for learning, opportunities for growing, and opportunities for getting better.
So I heard someone saying that you want to have both, positive and negative reviews. Well, not reviews, I guess, positive and negative voice around your public figure, because we were talking about negative and positive and negative reviews in the context of restaurant businesses now. But then we can also kind of say the same thing about, if you are trying to be the public figure, like be the spoken person of something, like someone said, you want to always have negative and positive reviews, right? Like, can you kind of elaborate on what you just said about businesses into, personal figures, like who are trying to be, the spoken person in the internet or something?
Yeah. So I'll address that in two ways. I mean, the first is, if you have nothing but 5-star reviews on Yelp or whatever the review board is for your business, Angie's List, what have you, people get skeptical. they don't believe it. They want to see at least 1 or 2 negative reviews because they don't think that there's anybody that can be 100% perfect for everybody. So there's a little bit of credibility that goes along with that. But I think when you're building a business, you have to put your foot in the ground, and you have to you have to decide, and we'll get into this a little bit more later, or maybe on your other podcast, but you have to decide what it is you stand for. That is so important right now, especially in United States, in America, where we're going through a lot of social reform, and people are going to be pickier about, consumers are going to be pickier about where they spend their money, and they want to know now because of the internet that the information is readily available. What do you spend? What do you stand for as a person, the CEO of this business? What does the business stand for? Because I want to give my money to somebody or a business that is in alignment with my values. And I don't want to support, a business that is not in alignment with my values. But the hard part about that is when you put your foot in the sand and you take a stand on something, you're going to piss somebody off. Like somebody's going to disagree with you. And that's okay, because maybe that's not your target client. That maybe that's not, the best person that you should be working with or aligned with. And so even though you'll gain many, many more followers and many more customers and many, many more clients, you're going to lose a few along the way as well. But at least you stand for something. And, there's I think it was Robert Collier, or one of the great copywriters, who said, look, if you're not pissing somebody off by noon, you're not getting your message out there enough. And,
that's a good point.
Yeah, that's just how it is. You can't, if you're trying to please everybody, eventually you're going to please nobody. You have to know who your client base is, who are the people you serve, and then serve them to the best of your ability.
So this is something that I explore a lot about in my book. Even I talk about the difference between being correct person and then being helpful person, right? And the way to go about it in the topic of leadership especially is about being helpful rather than correct person. But that being said, I think wanting to be correct is a common desire. Like, I think it's integrated into our human nature that everybody wants to be correct in some eyes, right? Including ourselves. But I want to know your opinion around this area, because, for example, this is a little bit like very extreme side of philosophy. But then if you think about like really anything, any information in this world, like being 100% accurate or being like super like concrete, legit source of information is almost impossible. But then a lot of people, have the need of like having to be the correct person of whatever they present, right? And maybe this is just me, but sometimes it triggers me as a thought that, and also I grew up in a culture where the things were either correct or wrong. So I had to always approach to things from the perspective of, is this correct or is this wrong? Like, that's the only two things that I knew growing up, right? Now I kind of really changed it, so I'm not there exactly anymore. But sometimes that fear of not being correct still arises in me, you know what I mean? So my question to you is, how do you think person can raise like absolute certainty about whatever they stand on? And this is very like philosophical, so I'm sorry if I'm like
sure. No,
super
again, pretty deep. Okay, so let's unpack this here. I mean, the reality of it is, each of us as persons, we're in a constant state of flux. We're in a constant state of change. The person that you were 10 years ago, 5 years ago, even a year ago, you're not the same human being, because you have a different set of experiences and life experiences that have shaped you. And so I think we need to practice a little bit of self-care and forgive ourselves and say, hey, it's not about being absolutely right. It's about doing the best we can with what we know. Because as you mentioned, yeah, you know, especially in the Asian culture, that there seems to be a lot of very black and white. But in the reality of the real world, there are an infinite number of shades of gray.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I think that we are also in a time and a place where a lot of us need to do a little less talking and a lot more listening, and to find out, you know, why people feel the way they do. And, you know, when you know, to swing it back into the entrepreneurial world,
Mm-hmm.
businesses would be better off doing a lot more listening to their ideal customer, to their ideal clients, and
Mm-hmm.
understanding what they want, and what's important to them, and what makes them feel good about themselves, so that they, you know, the businesses can deliver those things. Because
Mm-hmm.
your business ultimately isn't about your product, it isn't about your service, it's about how you make somebody feel in the moment when they buy it. So all the crazy sales tactics, it's like, great, you got the sale, but if immediately there's a buyer's remorse, it's like you've not done a really good job, because
Mm-hmm.
somebody doesn't feel good about doing business with you. They feel
Mm-hmm.
duped. But if you listen, and, you know, to their needs, and you listen to what they're all about,
Mm-hmm.
and you deliver them, now you're in a relationship with them. And especially, like, for us, you know, we're in the service industry.
Mm-hmm.
We do marketing. We see everything as a partnership.
Mm-hmm.
We want to build that relationship, so we
Mm-hmm.
can't afford to have, you know, somebody who's got buyer's remorse immediately thereafter.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want that. Um, so you know, and I think that also, kind of going forward, uh, it's okay to recognize that there may not be an absolute almighty correct answer,
Mm-hmm.
but there may be many shades of gray, and you know, it may be a very nuanced way of looking at things.
Mm-hmm. So this is my final question then, before wrapping up. So you brought up a very interesting point. I think we don't have to be certain about our knowledge as they are, but then we always should have this space for growth, right? Further growth.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also talked about like how businesses should act in that dynamic, right? Of like understanding of like how we should behave. So I want to ask you, when it comes to leadership, like when you had to manage teams, or when you had to manage even like client services, like how did you apply what we just talked about in this context, where you had to deal with customers who were unsatisfied, or where you had to deal with like a team members where your opinion was different from theirs, but then you still have to kind of act as a leader who is helpful, not being correct person, but who is helpful for the like for the team. Like, were there any particular time you can kind of, you know, talk about?
Sure. I mean, again, I think that it's important to listen, because
Mm-hmm.
everybody wants to feel like they've been heard, whether it's somebody that is on your team, or
Mm-hmm.
whether it's you know, whether it's a client who is
Mm-hmm.
bringing up their own suggestions, and we welcome that. We want to hear their suggestions, because the reality of it is, nobody knows their business more than they do. Nobody knows
Mm-hmm.
your business more than you do. Nobody knows my business more than I do. It is impossible, because of the amount of time and effort that I spend on it.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody could possibly know my business more than I do. So, you know, you have to listen. In the context of business and leadership, leadership is about making decisions. And if you don't make decisions,
Mm-hmm.
you're not leading. And again, this is where, I'll bring it full circle. You do the best you do the best that you can with the information that you have.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't concern yourself with making necessarily the correct decision. You just make the best decision and you move forward with it. And you move forward with conviction, and you move forward with certainty, and you move forward with the flexibility that if in the event you get different information that comes in, you have the flexibility to pivot on that decision. So to give you an idea of how all of this works, the way we work is we take a company, and the first thing we do is we do research. We want to know about the person. We want to know about the company and what it stands for and what the values are, who their ideal client is, what the marketplace looks like. We study their competitors. Like, we do a deeper dive than anybody else in the industry because we want to know all the data or all the intel that we can possibly gather on that business. And then, and only then, do we take that and set out a game plan as to, okay, here, this is your goal. This is the data that supports that goal. This is the best course of action to take in order to achieve that goal. By the way, that's the exact way that professional sports teams, put out their game plans for their next game. It's the same way that military forces, they gather intel to put together an operation. But then once you actually get into that operation, once you actually get into that game, you start getting new feedback and you start getting new data coming in, and you have to have that flexibility to change the game plan, to change the operation, as you go. And especially in the marketing world, you could whatever, you could be digging 3 feet away from a vein of gold, but you would only know that if you weren't stubborn and kept digging the hole in the same place. But if you looked at the data and said, you know what, if we just move this just a fraction over here to just extract the extra 1% out of things, then the whole thing explodes. And then everybody's millionaires, right? But that's how you behave as a leader. You just have to have the conviction that given the data that I've got, given the intel that I've got, I am making the absolute best decision that I can, but it's not set in stone. I have the flexibility, I have the knowledge, I have the leadership to pivot that decision or modify that decision as new information comes in. And to me, that's the only way. That's the only way that you can really have massive success, because if you come up with one decision and then it's that way or the highway, and the new data comes in and says, hey, look, you need to just adjust things just a little bit, maybe not a lot. You have to have that flexibility going forward.
Right. I see it as a little bit of dilemma too there, because, well, looking at Japanese businesses, corporations, I think the work culture is very different in that sense. I think a lot of those corporations contain a lot of senior leaders who are who are the managers, right? And then the way it works in Japan is that once you're managers, it's really hard for the younger people to come in to take over the management, right? So they can't fire people. That's the thing in Japan, Japanese rule. They can't fire people, even if you're older. So I think, and then also we have this respect culture, respect of elderly culture, right? In the culture. So that being said, I think sometimes our leaders fail to accept that innovative concept. They just want to sit on their own seat of management, and I guess, so to speak, ego of being that authority figure in the company just because I'm old, kind of. And then we still have that environment, I think. And then now it's changing a lot compared to before. But then if you even look at the numbers of startups or the ecosystem that's built around startup companies, for example, particularly tech startup companies, it's very surprising because Tokyo has like such an amazing, you know, advanced technology and everything, but then the numbers of these businesses being born, the new businesses being born, is like really, really lower compared to America, for example. So I think in Japan also, like we kind of needed to have that flexible thought as you were pointing out in the leadership. So it was very interesting. Okay, so I want to close this interview for today. And before closing it, I had really such an amazing time interviewing you today. You brought out like many, many interesting perspectives. So I really want to thank you for that. And before closing out,
I enjoyed it too.
Perfect. So before closing out, I wanted to ask you, like, where can people find you on social or wherever? Like, where can they go?
Yeah, there's two places you can find me. Again, my name is Creighton Wong with Exponential Clients. And so I hang out a lot on LinkedIn because I'm constantly working with innovative business owners to help them grow their business. And then the other place is you can go to my website, which is exponentialclients.com. And I've got a cool training over there. A lot of the stuff that we talked about here called the Ultimate Business Growth Playbook, and you can check that out as well. But yeah, send me a message and reach out to me. I love having these conversations and seeing where businesses are and seeing where we can help them.
Perfect. I'm gonna also list your links on the description so people can go
from there.
Okay, great. Perfect. Well, thank you very much for coming today.
All right, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, bye. Thank you.